All right, let's get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Priya Bhutani. Thank you for joining us today. The goal for today's discussion is to give you an overview of the regulatory process for medical devices in Mexico. For those of you who may not be familiar with RegDesk, we are a machine learning platform for regulatory that makes global compliance easier and faster. RegDesk is the trusted regulatory intelligence platform for many of the leading medical device companies around the world. We are happy to discuss offline how medtech companies are using AI and regulatory to get and stay ahead. With us today, we have a leading expert from Mexico, Rebeca Estrada. Rebeca Estrada is a regulatory affairs expert with over 20 years of experience in the medical device, pharmaceutical, and cosmetic industry. In the past, Ms. Estrada has worked for organizations like Fresenius Medical Care and leading pharmaceutical companies. Her vast and extensive experience includes technical dossier preparation, regulatory strategy across not just Mexico, but the entire LATAM region, implementation of quality management system, and also audits. Rebeca owns a consulting company in Mexico City focused on helping foreign manufacturers obtain product approval from COFEPRIS. And she has worked with a wide array of medical devices as well as in vitro diagnostics. So she's the perfect person to have today. But before we begin our discussion this morning, I'd like to turn our attention to our attendees. Thank you again for joining us. At the end of this meeting, we'll hold a brief Q&A. We encourage your participation. And when we say participation, since this is not this is sort of a different type of webinar in which we're giving the overview of device regulations and not just the upcoming changes, please provide your input and share your experience that you may have had with COFEPRIS. That would be very valuable. Also, please refer to the chat feature button on your screen. In the interest of time, submit your questions throughout the course of our talk, and we'll try to address as many of your questions as we can. Otherwise, we're happy to send you an email and address those for you. Also, we'd love to get your feedback on today's webinar and any ideas you may have for future webinar topics. We'll send a short survey post-webinar to your email, and again, we'd appreciate your feedback. Well, let's get started. Rebeca, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you, everyone, for connected to this webinar. And well, I'm happy to be here and share my experience with COFEPRIS with you.
Wonderful. So, let's start with the basic about classification, because that's the first question, is understanding how products are classified. So how are they classified in Mexico? Do they follow U.S. classification rules or European Union's classification rules, or do they have their own rules?
Well, COFEPRIS does have their rules for product classification, but they are most based on European rules because the classification is for class 1, 2, and 3. But there's no class 2A or 2B. And the classification is based on the time the product stays on the body, that enters to the body, and the risk of the product. If, for example, if the product is in the body less than 30 days, is considered class 2, and in this over 30 days, it's considered class 3.
So that makes sense. So it's a bit confusing in that the rules are similar to European Union because of it's dependent on how long the product is in your body orifice. However, they don't have concept of 2A, 2B. It is 1, 2, 3, similar to US nomenclature. Moving on, a lot of our viewers are IVD manufacturers as well. So can we also quickly touch upon whether IVDs have separate classification system?
Yes, for the IVDs, there are no special classification. They follow the same rules. And also most of the IVDs generally tend to fall on the class 2 category because they're separated like by the specialization required to manipulate the IVDs. If there need to be specially trained or not.
Okay, so part of medical device, no special requirements or law or rules around IVD classification. So that's clear. And so now we can proceed, now that we know device and IVDs will have similar approval process. Moving on to the approval process, we understand there are a couple different ways to register products, pathways in Mexico. Can you tell us more about what those two pathways are and how do they differentiate?
Yes, well, there is the traditional pathway, and this requires all the technical and legal documentation. They require the quality assurance documents and the manufacturing process, etc. And there is the abbreviated pathway. This is more for the countries that are that have an agreement with COFEPRIS, for example, US, Canada, European Union, Australia, and Japan. And this is another way to present the dossier that requires a little less document, but sometimes it's supposed to be faster, but in the reality, sometimes they don't comply with the timelines to obtain the registrations. These are another way to present the information, but not always is a better.
Got it. So the two methods, as you mentioned, are abbreviated and traditional. So the idea of abbreviated method, if we understand correctly, is that as long as you have approval from one of those GHTF markets, though it's not called that anymore, then you can go through it. It's supposed to be faster, but it's really not faster. And then you have the traditional pathway, which is supposed to take 8 to 10 months, but the traditional route. Now, speaking of, so in the US, the FDA is on they have a timeline. They have a certain amount of days that they have to respond to the clients. For the abbreviated pathway, do COFEPRIS reviewers not have such a time clock? Is that why is it not mandated that within 3 months that they should respond?
Yes, the COFEPRIS does have those timelines. It should be like 1 month, or sometimes 3 months, but the reality is that sometimes it takes longer, and maybe because of the load work or another situations, they don't follow the timelines. So this is something to have in mind, that sometimes the abbreviated way is not really the faster way.
Got it. So that's clear. That's good information to have. And in the chat box, if anybody wants to share their experience with abbreviated pathway, we'd love to hear from you. And then obviously there's a traditional. But coming back to abbreviated, just curious. So abbreviated pathway is not class based. So if I have class 2 or 3, I can, even with a class 3, I can go through abbreviated pathway. Is that right?
Yes, you can submit any class from 1 to 3, and there's no difference with the submissions. As long as the manufacturer has all the documents, they can submit any class.
Got it. And now this submission, last time we discussed Brazil, and they have a new electronic portal system. Does Mexico have that? Does COFEPRIS have an electronic portal through which you can submit applications, or is it a physical copy that you have to bring physically to COFEPRIS?
Yes, there's an electronic way to submit the dossier, but really in the practice, it's preferable to present a hard copy, a physical copy of the dossier, and to present it directly through the COFEPRIS offices. And this is more like the regular way. There are very little laboratories or manufacturers that presents their dossier by electronic media.
Got it. And then do you have to request an appointment with them, or is it flexible, or do you have to schedule an appointment ahead of time to then have your legal authorized agent physically go in and present the copy? Or is it sort of something you can just mail? Because with the FD, you can ship a hard copy, or you used to be able to ship. Now they have a portal system too. But nonetheless, I mean, with hard copies, are we talking about just being able to ship them, or do you have to physically request a meeting, an appointment with them?
Yes, the most common way to present the dossier is to get an appointment to COFEPRIS offices. They have this CIS, they call it CIS, that is Center of Integral Services, and they you can request a date and an appointment, sorry, and you can present not only one dossier, you can present many dossiers, as long as you mentioned that you will be presenting more than one. And an authorized person, sometimes is legal representative of the company, they go to COFEPRIS with the dossiers and they submit through the CIS. And they give you a code, a number, so you can track the application.
Online, got it. And let's go about over the third party. So we understand in here that there is a concept of third parties. It's not the same as notified bodies in European Union. Can you tell us what is the role of the third parties, and how can manufacturers use this method?
Yes, well, this figure of third parties, they don't have much time. They have like 5 years functioning for this activity, and the function is to review the dossiers and present to the manufacturer if there is inaccuracies or they're missing some documents or suggest some changes, and to make the dossier is ready for submission. And after the third party reviews the dossier, they issue a close letter to COFEPRIS, and this letter has to be presented by the manufacturer with the dossier at the time of submission. And this letter is like previously approval of the dossier. And if in the rare case that COFEPRIS has more doubts or have some questions, they call the third party, that is the one who reviewed the dossier first, and they ask for clarification. It's not necessary always that the manufacturer is present at the time of the clarification. It's more like between the third party and COFEPRIS, because, well, the third party is authorized by COFEPRIS, and they they don't need the presence sometimes from the manufacturer.
Okay, got it. So that's good to know. And with the third parties, so which is it? Can you use third parties for both abbreviated and traditional, or are there limitations, or can I, if I've abbreviated or whichever method pathway I use, I can use third party review?
The third parties work only for traditional submissions. They are not accepting the abbreviated way. And the time with the third party sometimes short terms, to 3 or 4 months for the approval of COFEPRIS plus the time that the third party evaluates the dossier. So it really is a good option if you look for get a faster approval from COFEPRIS.
Okay, so that's another reason why I'm assuming that clients may opt to go the traditional way, because then you can utilize the third-party review, and it's probably faster because so now once the third-party review, just want to touch upon some questions on this topic before we move on. So with the third party, once you submit a letter and you submit it to COFEPRIS, what happens? So who submits it? So reviewers will review the application. Then once it's submitted to COFEPRIS and they have the evaluation by the third party, does COFEPRIS review the application, or are they just basing approval based on the comments and feedback from the third party?
Yes, well, the manufacturer does have to submit the dossier and the application, and COFEPRIS takes the word from the third party, but does an overall review of the dossier along with the evaluation of the third party, so they can be sure that no problem is with the dossier, and after that they grant the registration. But this is why the time is shorter than the traditional way, because the traditional way can take up to more than a year. So if you compare, there is a really substantial difference using the third party.
Got it. Okay. And so, but regarding the fees, you would still have to pay COFEPRIS its fees and third party reviews an additional cost. Is that correct?
Yes. There is a difference. They're cost apart from the third party, because the third party are a private institution, and the COFEPRIS fee is apart.
Got it. And so regarding third party, so let's say I'm a manufacturer, I use a particular third party. I'm not happy with their feedback. Can I change third party? Are you allowed to change a third party because it's private institution, or do you have to stick with the same third party?
No, you can. There's a list of third parties in the COFEPRIS website, so you can choose the third party that is more suitable for you. And well, the only thing that, for example, you can't have a copy or keep a copy of the inform from the third party to COFEPRIS. But yes, you can change anytime the third party.
Got it. And you could use multiple third parties for different types of product registrations.
Yes, so maybe you can hire some third party for one specific class of device, and then for another, you can try to submit it with another third party. There's no special requirement for that.
Okay, got it. And then, we skipped a basic question about, is local in-country representation required? So if you are a foreign manufacturer, you do require that you need to have a legal authorized representative in Mexico, right?
Well, yes. Previously, they need to be an established company in Mexico. But from some years, they're accepting that they have a warehouse. If the company has a warehouse in the country, in Mexico, they can have their authorized or their legal representative, and then submit to COFEPRIS.
Got it. So it is required. So your legal authorized agent must have a warehouse. Is that correct? If you don't have a warehouse, so for instance, if you in your consulting firm, you do not have a warehouse, can you not represent someone in Mexico?
It's more difficult because, well, for the import of the medical device, you will need to someone that is in charge of that, and it is easier when the legal representative has a warehouse, and it does it gives COFEPRIS the certainty that there are no like phantom or enterprise or phantom company, like because sometimes it can give COFEPRIS the impression that the company is not very serious, or but it's in my experience, it's better that they have a warehouse.
They have a warehouse, because the warehouse, then they can physically go and inspect, and so they feel that it's a real entity. Understood.
Yes.
Got it. So now let's move on. I know we don't have too much time left, but you know what, we always like to cover what is the hardest or the most complex part, or let's say the process of getting approval. Where do foreign manufacturers, in your opinion, struggle in Mexico?
Well, I've seen a lot of requests from COFEPRIS to clarify or to present the correct legal documents. There is a very simple part of the dossier, but sometimes the companies do not present the correct documents, or sometimes they are expired, or simply they are not translated into Spanish. For the legal documents, they must be presented in Spanish, translated by a specialized translator. And sometimes even it's a very simple thing, the manufacturers don't present these documents. And also all the information that is presented in the dossier, if there is in another language, it has to be presented also in Spanish. For example, the quality assurance or testing data, this has to be presented also in Spanish. And sometimes the information is not clear for COFEPRIS. Sometimes they have some doubts, and they request more information or clarification for this information.
Got it. And actually, this is a segue into a question that just came up, which is related to some of this. So the question is, there's a UK manufacturer, and their products will be sold as UK products, but their factory is based in China, and they have an OEM agreement with that facility in China. COFEPRIS is requesting that this manufacturer provide more documents, because according to COFEPRIS, the documents with the factory name and their name is not matching. So what do they do? Because the factory won't be in their name, because they're using a contract manufacturer to manufacture their devices. So how do you have an idea? I mean, again, you can think about it and we can get back to the client, but the question is, what can they do if the names don't match?
Yes, well, you can, this is very specific, but you can present an agreement for manufacturing. So where you are saying that you are the owner of the product, but you are requiring that other company manufactures the product. So this is a way to solve this situation. And as long as you include this contract and this agreement, you can support that you have you are the owner of the product.
Got it. Well, they said they've tried that, but COFEPRIS has rejected it. So they're sort of stuck in this really bad situation where, again, maybe you have thoughts after this, and we can discuss this. But this is a very valid question. But this relates to, right, the names not matching up, and these are the things that cause the delays.
Yes, COFEPRIS, they need to be sure that the names are matching, and sometimes even the certificate of analysis, they don't match. Sometimes the batch codes or the company's name or something, and they do have questions to the manufacturer. So these are very important points, that all the information through the dossier is it's the same. Because sometimes the information is presented and the company does have a change in the legal name or something, and maybe one document is issued to one legal entity, and then the final name is different. So yes, it's very, very important that the information is the same through the dossier.
Got it. So then what happens if you keep running into the situation where they're not accepting the documents? Is there any other way that a client can?
Yeah, well, sometimes COFEPRIS does have appointments with the manufacturers. They are not the common thing, but they do accept the request for a technical appointment. So you can explain in more personal way the situation of the documentation. So maybe they can try to request a technical appointment and to ask COFEPRIS exactly why they're requiring and why they're requiring this way.
Got it. And then another really good question is about Anvisa documentation. So if you have approval in Brazil with Anvisa, can you register? Is there a shorter pathway if you have registration Brazil to then transfer that over to COFEPRIS?
Well, I think that the agreements are getting open to more countries. I'm really not sure if Anvisa is already approved. They were, I think they were working on the matching of the documents or something, but maybe I can look for more information.
Sure. And real quick, just your parting thoughts in terms of what can we expect from, is COFEPRIS working on, what are they working on? What's in their pipeline? What are they focused on? What types of changes can we expect? So it looks like this is one that if you have registration from other countries within South America, that there's harmonization of these documentation?
Yes, sometimes, right now, COFEPRIS is in a transition process because of the change of administration with the new government. But right now, the main focus of is to provide general access to healthcare to all the Mexicans, and COFEPRIS will be part of this by getting the registrations that are behind, and the new and for new products also. So they will be working on these authorizations, and maybe they can reevaluate or continue with the harmonization with another countries for created more abbreviated ways, or the abbreviated way works for more countries. So this can be also a way to provide the general access to the public for healthcare products. So I don't discard that this can be a point for working on the next years.
Got it. Well, we are out of time, in fact, a couple minutes over. Want to thank our viewers, our participants again. Thank you for a great discussion, for asking great questions, and thank you so much, Rebeca. It was truly a pleasure speaking with you today, and thank you for providing insight. Again, for our viewers, we will follow up with you with a very brief survey. Your feedback is vital, so please take seconds out of your schedule and give us some feedback, and we look forward to speaking with you again soon. And then actually before our next webinar, we'll notify you that we will be holding another webinar about regulatory automation, because we get that question a lot. How do you automate your regulatory intelligence and your internal processes? Do you have that? So we will be hosting that soon, and you'll learn about that very soon. But thank you again, and everyone have a great day. Thanks, Rebeca.
Thank you, Priya, and thank you everyone for connected. Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.